Hello again and welcome back to session 2. Now, just before we get to the actual story writing, this is very personal to me, but I believe to successfully write, sounds weird, you have to have a comfortable, nice place to write. And you should try and set a regular writing schedule. Now, by comfortable place, I have an office, a fancy back chair, a couple of screens I can show different things on, like Google if I need to research stuff, which is really handy. But what a setup really means is I'm comfortable. I've got a kitchen there for tea and biscuits. This is very personal to me. But wherever you like to write, make it a kind of comfortable and as undisturbed place as you can. I mean, I know headphones can work, for some people, but I think they get a bit uncomfortable, as earbuds do, but maybe that's just me. Sometimes I have instrumental music just in the background, just to fill the silence. It depends on where you are. My point is, get into a position or a place you can really focus, if you can. Now remember, bad backs for writers are the result of bad chairs and bad posture. So please look after your body. It is a writer's curse, so be sensible. Now, getting a bad back's not a smart move, no matter how brilliant the work or the novel or the story might be. And go back to that other point. If you can set a daily schedule to write, every single day, an hour or two if you can. I write for 4, but make it a habit to write, take breaks. See, for me, I can't not write. I need to write every day. And sometimes you'll find it gets that, well, for you, hopefully. I could start talking about writing motivation, which is very important. As in, don't stop. Don't question it too much. Just keep going. But the writing journey always starts with that rough but strong idea for a story. Now, I'm not going to say short story, novel, script or play. Not at this stage. I'm going to just stick with story, a bunch of words. A good story is the basis for all good work. The actual complete idea, really. But we'll quickly talk about that belief again. Belief in yourself. See, my first job for you is you have to be delighted and inspired and driven by your story idea. And you've got to have a kind of belief and a faith in it and how wonderful it is, or the wonderfulness of it. I mean, I just made that word up. Anyway, but you can write, but you can go backwards and forwards as you write, improving it as you go, so don't panic. You have to believe a story is good and valid, and most importantly, is going to keep someone, me, the writer, and the reader, engaged in it right up until the end. It doesn't matter the genre. It's about a strong and enjoyable story. You see, I figure if you like it, why wouldn't millions of other people like it too? Have faith. Now, as a writer or a new writer, I've told you about these computer programs, clever things that really let you take notes, count lines, proofread, spell check, grammar, blah, blah, blah. And if you like that kind of stuff, and I think it's a good idea, I think you should explore it. They don't teach you how to write or think of story ideas, but I tell you, they make the journey and the rules really easy. Now, when I say rules, I mean spelling, punctuation, that stuff. But on a personal note, again, I don't use one because I have my own system, but that's me. You have to develop your system. So, to begin, let's say you've got your story idea. And before we really get going, remember what we said? The start planning point, the comfort, where are we? Because now we start with a fairly detailed bullet point synopsis, describing the whole narrative of an entire story from beginning to end. Now, it's a really useful thing. I sometimes call it a proof of concept point, because it gives you a strong idea of how interesting and gripping the whole story could and can be. It's not going to have all the subtlety and the clever stuff and the twist you'll add as you go. And it might not even include all the characters you'll have. And importantly, even that ending you first thought of. But it should be very clear to you. A synopsis is a very rough guide. A map, if you will. I'll talk later about a map book. But start with a series of bullet-pointed lines that just show you whether this story and its narrative and its characters are strong enough to keep a reader engaged? Well, maybe it needs a little more thought, maybe some other twists. But it is important. You have to start with this synopsis just to guide you. It's a broad and rough kind of sketch that you can develop. But by using this, it begins to coalesce in your mind where you're going. The beginning, the middle, the end, all roughly sketched out. And that will show you the framework and whether you can sustain a good, engaging story. Now, here's a short example. Steve finds old, dirty gold poker chip in a junk shop, plastic, and he gets home and cleans it. And then he decides it's his lucky charm, and he takes it to his next game. And he finds it gives him the power to hear other people's thoughts when he's playing. So now he enters more local poker games, and he wins. And then he starts entering bigger games. And then things get out of control when he starts hearing the other thoughts from the players, murder plots and bad stuff. What does he do? There you are, series of bullet points. And there's a story idea you can take anywhere, to a happy or a sad or a weird ending. I must stress again, knowing the ending when you start isn't that important, not to begin with, because it really changes a lot when you write the story. Now, I wrote a novella, Circular Motion, for example, which you can listen to absolutely free on Story Hive. And you can even download the ebook if you want. But when I wrote my synopsis, it was a very detailed thing, because my story jumped back and forth from different characters to different countries to different locations, sometimes every few paragraphs. But then I could immediately see it kind of worked, even if it's roughly sketched out bullet point format. And the final ending only arrived a result of everything else I'd written. I had an ending, but it changed because it just naturally seemed to arrive. You see, in truth, once I'd finished it and done those final tidying and edit points, I found it was about 40,000 words long. It was a novella, bit of a long story. But it was my bullet point synopsis. That's why I wrote it with such confidence. I had a story guide, a map book, if you will. I knew what went where, with who and why. And very importantly, when. Because new characters and situations just seem to kind of arrive as you write. That's imagination. Now, when I write, I edit a lot as I go along, and I love to do this. But sometimes, as you write, you can pop back every now and again. Because writing, I say, is like a jigsaw puzzle. You see, you start with the full picture in your head, like the picture on the box. It's the final completed picture the puzzle should show. So that's what you've got to start off with. And you start to write, and you fill in some of the pieces, the edges, the frame, if you like, the bit that holds the story idea in. Then you add other pieces in to make the image come together. And you move towards the centre, where the real main bit of the image that tells us the big point of the story, till finally, you've got a complete jigsaw puzzle, the finished picture. So remember, the bullet point rough synopsis gives you that full picture to start with. Now, the story's going to change, and it'll develop, and it'll do all sorts of weird stuff. But it's the ending, as I say, could be different from what you first thought of. Because your imagination will make new ideas and characters occur. That's the joy. That's the fun of writing. But the journey that you got there with was your bullet-pointed synopsis. Now, in the next video, I'm going to break the writing journey down into some other bite-sized pieces. So, think about what I said, go take a look and listen at the Story Hive, and happy writing.